On a full moon night in a creepy cemetery, our protagonist walks with his weapon, ready to face the danger that awaits him, and as he proceeds, the dead, who were once buried, start making their way to the surface. Numerous half-decomposed bodies with glowing eyes suddenly sprout from their graves, growling and ready to tear our protagonist. He sweats profusely and starts eliminating the army of the dead. His only support is a little turtle that finds its place on his shoulder, and occasionally comments on his style from the viewers keep the mood from getting tense. Soon our hero starts to totter, but there is no end to the corpses, and when they attack him from above, he is subdued under their feet, and in no time, dozens of those reanimated corpses tear him apart. He shouldn't have died like this, he thinks before everything goes blank. Suddenly he wakes up with a start and finds himself trapped inside a wooden chamber. He calls out for help, but no one hears his pleas. Our protagonist looks around and starts panicking when he realizes he is in a wooden chamber, wondering if he's dead and buried in a coffin, but he brushes away the thought as he would have been lying down instead of standing upright. Since the walls are made of wood, he thinks he can break them and soon starts punching the wall, and as it breaks, some kind of liquid oozes out. Our protagonist thinks it is water since it is dark, and he cannot see anything, but when he tastes it, the liquid is sweet like honey. It is not an ordinary honey but provides life force and heals wounds. His hand, which was bleeding because of constant punching, miraculously heals. Now that he has a powerful tool for his aid, he starts punching the wall without holding back anything, and time passes without him realizing how long it has been before the wooden wall bursts open. He steps out of the chamber and realizes there is a drain with honey flowing in it. He looks around to see a window blocked with a huge stone, and the other window is closed with steel bars, when suddenly he hears the system congratulate him for escaping from the dungeon. He looks at the screen that tells him only 90 people can enter Dungeon 1 to 2. Our protagonist yells at the prospect of more such dungeons. He is asked to choose a nickname, as his escape will be streamed. Not believing any of this to be real, he wonders if he got sucked into some game and yells, "Please save me," which inadvertently becomes his nickname, and he cannot change till the end of the game. Soon a comment section appears, and the only viewer trolls him for his choice of nickname. The protagonist is stunned when he realizes he is being watched and looks at all the information the system has on him. And he almost has a panic attack when he sees he was in the coffin for 306 days. He asks the voice if he is dead, and the voice tells him that he is but isn't at the same time. We then see the man behind the voice watering the flower while talking to the protagonist through a screen. The voice continues to tell him if he makes it within the top 90, he'll be bragged about and will meet King Yanluo, the King of Hell. The protagonist accepts his fate and realizes that he might have to entertain the viewers to earn balloons to buy things from the game store, and if he is able to make it through, he might get a chance to go back. Now full of determination, he bows and introduces himself as Go Insum to his viewers. The viewers laugh at him hysterically when he shares he punched the wall for 300 days, and someone gives him 7 balloons for being utterly funny. With a metal filer and a ladder, he starts filing away the bars, and it takes him 2 weeks to remove 2 bars. Frustrated, he starts smashing the ladder. Using the broken pieces of the ladder, Go Insum makes fire by vigorously rubbing 2 sticks together, but accidentally sets his hair on fire. Since things turn out that way, he walks near the boulder and stands under it to heat it with the fire, and in no time the boulder comes off, and his viewers demand an explanation. Go Insum reveals that the boulder is not actually a rock, but a turtle, which he had recognized from its shell's pattern earlier. He also guessed from the clues and determined the theme 10 symbols of longevity, which is just a speculation. Still, it led him to escape the dungeon and enter the dungeon treasure, from where he can leave with 1 treasure in his inventory, and he'll be automatically transported to Dungeon 1 to 2. But he soon realizes the coins and riches are just a deception, and he needs to find something to help him pass through further stages. After checking out a sword, he gathers his strength by eating a loaf of bread with magical honey spread over it when the turtle asks for some of it. Go Insum is generous enough to offer some of his bread to the turtle and notices a sphere inside the turtle's mouth. With super fast reflexes, he grabs the orb out of the turtle's mouth and finds that it has the capacity to domesticate a wild animal up to heroic rank. Again, thinking about the theme for the dungeon, he deduces the main character of Dungeon 1 to 1 is the turtle and feeds it with the orb. Suddenly the winds start swirling around the turtle, and it transforms into a giant spirit turtle. But the majestic being soon reverts into its infant form, which squirts healing liquid from its duodenum. Go In-sung gets excited with a mythic addition to his achievements, earning him a high rank. And with all the recommendations pouring in, he levels up. He bows to show his appreciation, but soon passes out from fatigue. Go In-sung wakes up to chirpings and sees dozens of chicks before him. He had fallen asleep during his task, which involves separating the female chicks from the males, so they can be sent to be raised, while males are discarded after they are rendered useless. Suddenly, a spirit envelopes Go In-sung, reminding him that males are also living creatures before throwing Go In-sung into Dungeon 1-2. The system tells him that he cannot take food to the Dungeon 1-3, and with stairways destroyed, he has to find a way to get out of there using his wisdom. He notices the ceiling is very high, so he skims through the shop options and decides to raise the chicks. But before that, he chooses to increase his viewers. Quite some time has passed, and the chicks are all grown up. His viewers bully him as his stream has been boring recently, but he changes that after he discloses the chicks are all females, and he's going to eat the eggs that will provide him stamina and dexterity. After he has had a few eggs, his body suddenly becomes buff, and he starts smashing his way out. His tame turtle young guy helps him by licking his wounds and healing them, and as a reward, he feeds the turtle some chicken feed. With the spot stilling up, he hurries and thinks of a plan where he rubs the raw eggs on himself and plucks the feathers from the chickens to attach to himself and make wings so he can fly to the openings high up on the ceiling, though his viewers think otherwise and plan to report for animal abuse. However, his plan to fly fails, and he falls with a thump and ends up feeling dejected. Just as he ponders what went wrong, he discerns that he lacks life force and immediately starts drenching the feathers and himself in the honey water, which makes the feathers enter his flesh and become one with his body. He then uses a rope to stabilize the wings and, with a bright smile, takes off and reaches the top of the dungeon, where he finds a pathway that leads to Dungeon 1-4, a reward for escaping the hard way. One of his viewers points out that Yama watches the stream too, as the scene shifts to a mystic hallway, where the Yama slurps his drink, impressed by Go In-sung. Go In-sung, however, doesn't go right away and gets some more chicken feed for the chicken left, and the rest he saves for young guy. He then packs a few chickens as food, and when reminded he can't take the food with him, he plays a reverse Uno and says the food wasn't allowed in the Dungeon 1-3, but he will be entering Dungeon 1-4. Being the first to escape, he is given a chest as his special reward, with a skill book that helps strengthen the reader's focus. As soon as he opens the book, a bright light surrounds him, and he feels his head get clearer. As he proceeds, his path lights up, and the system tells him that the track security is reinforced, but he can escape using his determination and wisdom. Go In-sung looks through the shop and gets leather armor, but little does he know that a blade is about to strike him. Go In-sung dodges the blade just inches away from him, and soon enough an arrow springs toward him, and he dodges it like before. He thinks for a little while before bringing his chicken out and eating 20 eggs to build his strength, and once he feels he is ready, he charges towards the exit. With his strength and focus activated, he easily sees through the traps and uses chickens as shields for bullets. He even manages to catch a spear with his bare hands and manages to fend off the numerous arrows aimed at him. But when one of the arrows pierces his back, he makes a run for it, reminding himself that he needs to keep going to survive. His last obstacle is a blade that is about to slice his legs when he blocks it with a spear and gains momentum to make a jump to the safe zone. He finally breathes a sigh of relief and falls asleep for an entire week. He wakes up confused and soon recalls the events before he fell asleep and sees a huge door in front of him. He tries to push it open but finds a keyhole that looks exactly like the first arrow that struck him, and he has no other option but to go back to retrieve the arrow. Just then, the system announces that Instant Beauty has entered Dungeon 1-4, and Go In-sung can't help but notice that it is a recurring name and has always been in the first few to escape. Now that another streamer has entered the same dungeon, Go In-sung will be able to talk to them. He immediately sends a message to Instant Beauty, excited to finally talk with someone in the same situation as him. However, he doesn't realize that the woman who entered the dungeon is already worried, and now this message vexes her. She replies politely, even though she thinks he's a loser. Just then, the same-shaped arrow strikes her and almost pierces her. This enrages her, and her true demonic self comes out, flinging the Dan arrow into oblivion. Go In-sung asks her why she's taking long to reply, and she tells him about the arrow hurting her and that she threw it away. Go In-sung can't help his laughter and proposes to trade information. Instant Beauty is a bit reluctant, but when Go In-sung mentions that she can't escape without the arrow she threw, She goes berserk and tries to look around for the arrow. She decides to put her pride at bay and take help from Go In-sung. Meanwhile, Go In-sung thinks about the symbols of longevity, which are the sun, clouds, mountains, water, pine trees, turtles, deer, cranes, peaches, and herbs. Out of these, the first 3 dungeons represented turtles, cranes, and mountains. Instant Beauty is curious about the arrow, and upon asking, Go In-sung reveals that the arrow is the key used to get out of 1 to 4 and appears only once. The blood drains from her face as she realizes she has just flung away an essential object required to get out. Instant Beauty's actual name is Yuhaitian, and she knows men are always lining up to help her, and she uses it to her advantage. Even the Prince of Heaven sends her 15 balloons, along with many other viewers, to comfort her after Go In-sung leaves her to fend for herself. Acting all cute and thankful for her diehard following, she gains their love in numerous balloons, making her the highest bearer. She rethinks her strategy and finally removes her armor and jacket before she jumps off the ledge. Instant Beauty didn't jump into the honey water, but onto the side of the ledge and starts pulling herself forward to avoid the traps. But she has reached her limit, and as she pulls herself up on the ledge, an arrow strikes her, injuring her. She falls into the honey water river, and as she drowns, she remembers her time at the National Martial Arts Dojo, where she was taught never to give up by her master and dad. No matter the situation, there is always a way to overcome it. Meanwhile, Go In-sung pulls out his hair, trying to figure out how to get through the door. He notices the arrows are made of bamboo, and dips it in the honey water river to vitalize them with life force before sowing them. While waiting for them to grow, he decides to buy bread from the shop when he comes across a growth accelerant, a fluid that increases the growth rate by 100 times. He purchases the fluid and sprinkles it on the bamboo. Suddenly, there is a surge in their growth. At the same time, Instant Beauty comes out of the water, determined not to give up, and starts swimming toward the exit. Now that he has a way out, Go In-sung climbs the bamboo and reaches the entrance, and again, he's the first to arrive. Go In-sung's viewers are confused as to why he's climbing higher on the bamboo and not going onto the bridge, and he is happy to share his observation. He had noticed handles on the ceiling earlier that he climbs and finds a vent. He sticks his hand into it and finds something he only reveals once he reaches the bridge. It is a heavenly bamboo fruit that improves health and increases strength tenfolds upon consumption. Since his body is too weak to withstand the fruit's power, he keeps it in his inventory to save for later. He walks towards the entrance of the tunnel that leads to 1 to 5, but before he can celebrate, he is swallowed by the ground. Instant Beauty also reaches the stairs after retrieving the arrow key and proceeds to climb it to open the entrance to 1 to 5. Meanwhile, Go In-sung is still falling, and soon reaches an exit that takes him out in the open. It is a full moon night, and he is the first to reach 1 to 5 and earn a skill book. This time he is rewarded with the Iron Will skill that doubles the physical statistics for 3 minutes, and automatically activates prior to death. Go In-sung accepts that it is a shitty skill that would have eliminated him after using it. He is then given the option to choose a manager from amongst his viewers, and he summons the one who gave him attention and balloons from the beginning. A bright beam appears in front of him, and in the center of it stands Self-Reflection, a foreigner. He greets Go In-sung and introduces himself before disclosing that in the outside world, he was known as Socrates. Go In-sung can't believe the great philosopher Socrates is standing before him, and he can't help but ask how he can speak such good Korean. Socrates tells him he has been in that place for 2,000 years now, but upon seeing him doubt the place, he reminds Go In-sung that they are not in hell. But the place Go In-sung used to live in before he died was hell, because money was all that mattered there, and a man was nothing more than an enslaved person. Go In-sung can't argue with his logic and changes the topic by admitting he thought his manager would be his age. But that too is made into a topic of debate until a reanimated corpse attacks him to bite him. Go In-sung is able to overpower it, and Socrates informs him that the corpses are called undead, and their head has to be removed to eliminate them. His next task is to pass through the maze while avoiding the undead. Go In-sung retrieves young Guy to heal him and, after much contemplation and social pressure, buys a diamond spear. Now that he is ready, he accidentally chooses the difficulty level advanced after being pushed by Socrates, who wanted him to choose the advanced level because of a good reward. They soon enter the dungeon 1 to 5, where he can enter with 4 members. Suddenly the undead attack and overpower him. This was the scene shown at the beginning, when he first lost consciousness, but this time he sees Socrates as he enters Go In-sung's body that releases a massive energy ball, warding off the undead. After Socrates takes care of some of the enemies, he tells Go In-sung to take control and shows him the technique of dodging and attacking. But the attacks only hold them back and do not eliminate them. Socrates suggests he use holy water to destroy their heads, and Go In-sung does exactly that. He makes one of the undead drink the holy water till it blows apart. But with so many of them, he tries to think of something else. Socrates then tells Go In-sung about Yeongu being a direct descendant of a black turtle, representing Yin, the light within the darkness that controls the dead and the spirits. Since Yeongu is in mystical tortoise, it grows by taking in impure energy and sends the souls back to the afterlife. He brings out Yeongu, who starts absorbing all the negative energy from the undead. Once he's done, Go In-sung thanks Socrates for telling him about the true powers of Yeongu and helping him out. He then asks Socrates how they should get out of there, and Socrates gives him a hint by pointing out to Tale of Theseus's labyrinth, where Theseus used a thread to escape the labyrinth. Following his example, Go In-sung starts making a trail by throwing little pieces of bread. Meanwhile, Instant Booty enters the dungeon 1-5. It has been 2 days since Instant Booty entered the dungeon but hasn't contacted Go In-sung. Now that the total number of members is 4, as required to complete the challenge, Go In-sung thinks they are required to complete it together. But he decides against sending her a message and continues making a trail. Go In-sung changes his direction to avoid direct confrontation with the monsters, but meets a dead end. He starts whining about it and notices the breadcrumbs are gone. Just then, he hears a voice, and Instant Booty walks before him from the tall grass. They finally meet and Go In-sung greets her. His attention is immediately drawn to the ultimate indestructible sword she is carrying, and he infers she must be filthy rich because that one sword costs 1,600 balloons. Socrates advises him to ask Instant Booty about the breadcrumbs, and he asks her if she has eaten them by mistake, but she denies it, and they bicker about it for some time till she notices Yeongu and asks Go In-sung if the tortoise has eaten them. Yeongu takes offense at such an accusation and starts squealing at Instant Booty. She cannot take any more of this bullying and asks her manager Queen Bee to come out and help her. Socrates immediately gets infuriated upon hearing Queen Bee's name and demands him to come out of Instant Booty as he has possessed her. However, Queen Bee chooses not to show himself and Go In-sung proposes they work together to get out of the dungeon. Instant Booty agrees and decides to take the route that has monsters, as it might have something important. Since there are 8, she asks him to take on 4, and with the speed of light, she mutilates the monsters one by one. Go In-sung can't sit back and watch her in amazement, so he levels up his strength and takes on the remaining 4. After successfully mutilating all the creatures, they look at a black box the monsters were protecting and find a map that shows a way out of the labyrinth, but opening it will attract monsters. So Go In-sung proposes he'll get rid of the monsters and Instant Booty will have to share holy water with him. She agrees to the deal, and Go In-sung uses Yeongu to suck the negativity from the monsters. But Go In-sung stops Yeongu so he can test out his theory. He wants to know how these monsters are able to attack them so accurately, even though they can't see or hear. He pulls out the heavenly bamboo fruit that possesses an immense amount of life force. He makes Socrates hold the fruit and asks him to stand near Instant Booty. Just then, the revived monsters attack Socrates, taking him by surprise and forcing Instant Booty to quickly attack the monster, preventing it from injuring Socrates. Socrates is confused and wonders why the monster is attacking the undead like him. Go In-sung explains that the monsters are not reacting to smell but to the life force. He further states his plan to distract them while he reads the map. He asks Socrates to take a bite of the heavenly bamboo fruit and run around as bait to attract monsters to himself, while Go In-sung will look at the map and run, and once the effect of the fruit wears off Socrates, he can catch up with the two. Socrates refuses and asks Queen Bee to come out as he should share some responsibility. After much persuasion, Queen Bee finally reveals himself. Out of nowhere, Plato appears and Socrates addresses Plato as his student. It is revealed Plato is Queen Bee. Their pleasantries soon turn into a squabble as Socrates reveals some dark secrets about Plato fancying women. Plato is flabbergasted by such an accusation and more so because Instant Booty is disappointed in him. Something takes over Socrates and he punches Plato in anger. He asks Plato to run while Socrates possesses Go In-sung. He opens the map, but it is too complicated to memorize within 20 seconds before 1033 monsters make their way toward the group. Instant Booty asks Go In-sung to close the map as she has memorized it. As soon as he closes the map, Go-in-sung instructs Queen Bee to eat the fruit, and after he takes a bite, Queen Bee dashes away, taking the monsters with him. Meanwhile, Instant Booty leads the way, and they reach the exit, or they thought so, because soon after, Go-in-sung realizes it is the entrance and not the exit. He also notices the breadcrumbs he'd dropped on their way also disappeared. Seeing his expressions change, Instant Booty asks him if he knows something. Go-in-sung draws a map of the labyrinth and points out that because the map is symmetrical, the entrance and the exit can secretly be changed without the participant's knowledge. Just then, Socrates unpossesses Go-in-sung and appreciates his analytical skills. Go-in-sung gets furious at Socrates for not telling him earlier, even though he knew about the deception all along. Socrates laughs and points out that giving away spoilers is a grave offense, but he also laughs because he possesses Go-in-sung's body so that he doesn't have to run around mindlessly. Suddenly, a warning sign is displayed that the participants are not allowed to stay at the entrance for very long as the great spectator is getting annoyed, resulting in the moonlight letting dim and the creatures getting stronger as it gets dark. The system warns them of the great spectator's revival. The great spectator is revealed to be a humongous creature with no recognizable features. It sounds angry as it roars and forces them to run to a hole in the middle of the labyrinth, heeding the system's instructions. As they reach the middle, Go-in-sung sits down with a thump, tired after running so much, and notices the moon has got bigger. Socrates brings his attention to the fact that the monsters cannot enter that circle because the moon's light is the strongest. Go-in-sung deduces the theme of this challenge as the moon from the 10 symbols of longevity. Still, the moonlight keeps weakening, and to add to their woes, the great spectator attacks Instant Beauty and drags her toward him with his tentacle-like fingers. However, Instant Beauty attacks it with her blade and it flings her in the air. Go-in-sung feels there is no use attacking the colossal monster. Instead, he targets the moon and throws his spear toward the moon, but it catapults back to the ground. Having no choice but to face the great spectator, Go-in-sung throws his spear at the monster, injuring him. This enrages the monster, and it attacks Go-in-sung, which he dodges and gets his hands on Instant Booty's sword. Go-in-sung then activates his strength focus skill to prepare himself for the fight. Go-in-sung makes his way toward the weak point of the great spectator, but before he can strike him, the monster grabs Go-in-sung with his tentacles and smashes him against the ground. Go-in-sung is handled roughly till he is almost dead, but just as his heart is about to give up, the Will of Iron ability activates, healing him completely and enhancing his physical capabilities by 2 for 3 minutes. However, the damage will resume in 3 minutes. Go-in-sung realizes with enhanced powers, he still can't beat the monster, so he focuses his attention on the moon. Since the sword is meant for slashing, he turns to Socrates with pleading eyes to help him get balloons so he can buy an indestructible spear. But to his chagrin, Socrates hides behind one of the undead so he doesn't have to help Go-in-sung. Go-in-sung feels dejected, but a gift of 1,200 balloons from Instant Booty makes him hopeful again. She gets back on her feet and takes the sword from him. She wants him to throw the spear at the moon while she handles the monsters. Go-in-sung purchases the ultimate destructive spear, and with 30 seconds left, Go-in-sung climbs the great spectator, dodging all his attacks, and once he reaches its head, Go-in-sung launches the spear toward the moon. The spear strikes the surface, and with one blow, the surface shatters into pieces. As the surface shatters, another moon is revealed, which is the real moon, and the shell that is destroyed is just an outer covering that was getting thicker gradually. Now that there is nothing to block the moon's bright light, the monsters start melting as the light shines upon them. Go-in-sung urges young Guy to eat all the energy, and as the last specks of the monsters evaporate, Yun-gu lies on his back in satisfaction. The system tells them that they have passed Dungeon 1 to 5 and also the Spirit Turtle has met the nutritional requirements to evolve to the advanced grade where it can absorb soul essence to improve physical stats. Along with that, he has obtained the Great Wraith Soul Stone. Go-in-sung realizes he has only 5 seconds remaining till the deactivation of Unyielding Will and accepts his fate that he is going to die. But then he remembers he has the heavenly bamboo fruit and eats it just before he runs out of time and goes down on his knees as he feels a stabbing pain in his chest. Go-in-sung coughs up blood and goes limp as others rush to his side. Socrates checks his pulse and determines he is still alive, and sometime later, Go-in-sung wakes up screaming. The little spirit Tortivos had been healing him all this while. Socrates tells him that he was unconscious for a whole day. It is nothing less than a miracle that Go-in-sung was able to fight against the Great Wraith, as he's considered an elite even in advanced grades. He is also gifted the Soul Stone that contains the soul of the Great Wraith. Extracting the soul allows him to learn one of the Great Wraith's techniques, and for it to work, one would need a soul extractor which he can find in the next dungeon. He also needs an evolution stone to evolve the spirit turtle. His unyielding will has also increased from 3 to 4 minutes, but Go-in-sung decides not to use this skill ever again. Once he has seen all the upgrades, he looks for instant booty, and Socrates tells him she is waiting for him at the exit, as she has given up first place for his hard work. He reaches the exit where instant booty is waiting for him. She looks concerned for him and tells him that he was able to breathe after he received mouth-to-mouth resuscitation from Socrates. Go-in-sung is shocked to hear that Socrates saved his life. Instant Beauty then insists he goes first. Go-in-sung asks her again if she is okay with him going first, and she insists. He shakes hands with her and wishes to meet her soon. Socrates also sees Playo off and warns him not to fool around. With that, they bid goodbye to each other, and as soon as Go-in-sung exits Dungeon 1 to 5, he is congratulated for clearing the dungeon at hard difficulty, as it is the first time in 1351 years that hard level is cleared. Even the great King Yeomra congratulates him on passing the special stage. Go-in-sung's fan following has increased, and he also earns a 50% discount coupon as a reward. He has to choose one between the two doors, so he chooses the red door. He steps into the red town, where everything is red. Go-in-sung feels Yeon-gu should rest in the inventory as it could be dangerous for the little spirit animal. Just as he steps forward to explore the town, a giant man looks at him and suddenly charges at him. His explanation for picking a fight with Go-in-sung doesn't make sense, and Go-in-sung doesn't have time for such shenanigans. He tries to run away, but the giant catches hold of him and claims that Go-in-sung doesn't remember the favor the giant did for him. As he strikes Go-in-sung with a bottle, Go-in-sung wields his ultimate diamond spear and blocks the bottle, but is amazed that such a powerful spear can't break a bottle. Suddenly the giant overpowers Go-in-sung and knocks him unconscious. He then drags Go-in-sung to his restaurant and makes him sit at a table. Go-in-sung gains consciousness and is shocked to see egg-fried rice served to him by the giant. The dish looks delicious, and Go-in-sung can't help himself from eating the dish. The giant joins in, but just after a few bites, the giant falls face down on his plate. Go-in-sung smiles as it is revealed that he had mixed sleeping pills in his food when he was distracted. He tries getting out, but when all the windows and doors are locked. Go-in-sung uses a chair to smash the windows, but the chair bounces back, slamming on his head. Some of the viewers point out that Go-in-sung will have to stay there for 2 months. Reading this, he tries contacting Instant Booty, but she can't be contacted since she entered the blue door. To make sure the giant doesn't wake up again and thwart his plan of escaping, Go-in-sung uses a beer bottle to smash the giant's head, but to his surprise, the clan protection activates that doesn't allow him to hurt anybody from their clan. He then tries smashing a plate, but the system tells him that the plate is a soul extractor. He will have to place a soul stone on the item, and it will start extracting souls. To test it out, Go-in-sung places the soul stone of the Great Spectre, and as the process ends, the trait of the Great Spectre's hunting instinct is acquired. Go-in-sung decides to explore the place and finds an unlocked room that has many valuable items and weapons, but when he finds his own weapon on display, he realizes it is a black market. He is determined to take back what belongs to him and uses the bottle to smash the glass casing, but the bottle again bounces back and smashes him in his face. After cursing his luck for 5 minutes, he decides to look around and finds a crystal when the Great Spectre's hunting instinct is triggered, and he senses a life force, but before he can turn, the giant hits Go-in-sung's head making it bleed, and he soon passes out. When he wakes up, the entire cycle of the giant serving him a plate of egg-fried rice repeats, and he asks Go-in-sung to get used to it as he is stuck there for his entire life. It has already been his 14th day there, and Go-in-sung thinks of ways to escape. So far, he has learned how to open the front door by observing the giant, but he has to find some other clue. As he switches between blue and red, he is suddenly reminded of purple, the color resulting from mixing the two, and he remembers seeing a purple amethyst on display. Go-in-sung has a plan, but he needs to confirm something before, so one evening, he asks the giant about clan protection, and the giant is taken aback, wondering how Go-in-sung knows about it. Upon questioning, Go-in-sung reveals that he heard it when the giant passed out after having food laced with sleeping pills. Go In-sung somehow convinces him to talk a little about a sad legend, but the giant doesn't divulge much. He asks Go In-sung to eat first, and only when he has had a bite does the giant start eating. But he again falls for the trap and falls unconscious after having sleeping pills-laced food. This time Go In-sung used Young-gu's help, and even though he had a bite, he had nutrition tonic that doesn't let its consumer sleep for the next 24 hours. He then buys an advanced evolution stone, but when it comes to buying amethyst, he isn't sure whether it'll help him escape. With shivering hands, he places the order, and after he gets the amethyst, he tries many ways to find clues about it. But then the list in his inventory strikes him odd, and taking a clue from the first letters and number, he twists the amethyst. Just when he's left with a few moves, the giant wakes up from his slumber and attacks Go In-sung for tricking him again. Go In-sung, however, continues twisting it and opens the pathway to the dungeon 1-7. Go In-sung thanks the giant for the food and disappears. The giant feels sad because he is alone again, but when another participant enters, he is happy again and runs to take care of him. Go In-sung is the first to enter the dungeon 1-7, and the chamber looks like a gym. The system tells him a monster is sleeping on the other side of the door, and he must have the strength and courage to escape the dungeon. He looks around and feels that he needs to exercise in order to get stronger, but first, he is excited to unveil the random skill he has earned. The skill helps him increase the power of the equipped weapon. He then brings out Young-gu outside and feeds it the advanced evolution stone, which evolves the spirit tortoise to an advanced water attribute. The system alerts Go In-sung that the spirit animal will regress back to normal grade if it runs out of energy. Young-gu becomes a blue tortoise with horns and grows larger. Its special skill is the Wave of Life, where it can easily manipulate like a living part of the body and can summon holy water and make it erupt. Go In-sung sends the spirit animal back into inventory, and just then, he gets a message from Linny, another participant from the Blood Clan, asking for his help. They are a guild and can only send him messages like this because he chose the Red Village under their administration. The Blood Clan and all other guilds aim to escape the dungeon. Linny assures him that he'll get all his questions answered and invites him to one hub, which can be reached after he escapes the 1-10 dungeon. His viewers tell Go In-sung that joining a clan makes him Tier 1. Go In-sung decides to think about it later and focus on escaping. All of a sudden, he senses a life force, and the system tells him a weak manticore is taking a nap, and he can enter but can't return after 5 minutes. Go In-sung wishes to enter, and he is taken to the other side of the door, where he sees a huge lion-like animal with wings sleeping. Go In-sung is dumbfounded after seeing such a huge creature before him and refuses to believe it is a weak manticore. He starts panicking because he isn't left with many balloons, and the shop also doesn't show any weapons he could use to tackle the manticore, and wished he had his adamantine spear. So he decides to use a normal spear and observes the creature when the creature suddenly sneezes on Go In-sung, and he gets covered in its mucus. Go In-sung activates his focus to clear his head and moves around to observe the location. He finds weeds growing on the ground of an ancient gladiator arena but finds it odd as it is cold. With just 2 minutes remaining, Go In-sung decides to go back and return with a plan. But he gets distracted, and the time runs out, and the manticore wakes up. The manticore is enraged as his slumber is cut short by Go In-sung's presence, and it attacks him. Go In-sung tries to find a weak spot and attacks it using his spear, but the spear gets deflected by the metal plates. The attack makes the manticore even more furious, and it claws Go In-sung, injuring him. He is bleeding profusely, and just as the manticore is about to finish him off, the system asks him if he wants to go back, and Go In-sung gladly agrees. He is transported back into the Gymnasium, and the system gives him an update on a failed task. It also tells him that the weak manticore will regain some of its strength. He summons Young-gu from the inventory and takes its help to heal. His mood improves when he sees Linny's donation, but it suddenly becomes a competition between Socrates and Linny to become Go In-sung's biggest fan, and is won by Socrates. With his stats increased by 1%, Go In-sung is full of vigor and starts training hard, using the equipment there. After he feels he's ready to face Manticore, he decides to go in. He also looks confident because he has a plan, which entails attracting Manticore's attention by throwing high-quality feed and using the window to run in the opposite direction. He finally enters the Manticore's chamber and immediately gets overwhelmed by its sheer presence. The Manticore doesn't waste any time and attacks Go In-sung, but he flings the food and Manticore falls for it and starts eating the food. while Go In-sung makes a run for the exit, but stops when the manticore growls at him. Go In-sung stays at his place and thinks about the manticore's cavities that have slowed its eating speed. Go In-sung takes a risk and runs as manticore chases him and injures his back with its claws. Go In-sung reaches the door but realizes it is a small room that the manticore can't enter. Relieved, he summons young guy to heal his wounds, but he's taken by surprise when the manticore breathes fire, and his hair again is on fire. He distracts the manticore by throwing some food chunks and evolves young guy to use his water cannon power to put out the fire. By the time the fire is put out, all his hair has burned, and Go In-sung has become bald. He shivers and starts crying in fear and helplessness while young goody licks his now bald head. He tries to look for a solution, but he can't seem to focus. Meanwhile, Linny sends in more balloons and hints at using the amethyst. He concentrates on the amethyst for some time using his strength and focus skill. He then returns to the dungeon 1-7 and looks confident. He puts his hand in the inventory to lure the manticore with some food but finds the feed empty as he has used it all. He tries purchasing it, but the system warns him that he can't purchase anything from inside the arena. Blood drains from Go In-sung's face as he realizes he has run out of options. What will happen next? Will Go In-sung survive this attack or succumb after reaching so far along? To know more, subscribe to our channel. And if you liked the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up.